Hi, everyone. Welcome to Initiation into Mystery, our 15-part series on the mysteries of the Rosary. Today we are on part 8, the Crown of Thorns. And this is the very central mystery of the Rosary. There's 7 mysteries before it, and there's 7 mysteries after it, and that's not accidental.
No.
If we think of the 7 chakras and that up and down movement, if we think of those 7 sorrows and 7 joys of Mary, right here in the center, the
Mm.
kind of black heart, black soul, the black center of the rosary is the
Yeah.
crown of thorns.
And interestingly, this is one of the few mysteries that Our Lady has ever commented upon.
Yeah.
She once said, "This is the true crown." That was all she said. This is the true crown.
So let's use the methodology we've been talking about, which is to know what the story is, and then to kind of know the bigger framework of the story, and then bring our imagination and our intuition into it.
Hmm.
Um, Jesus has been arrested by the Roman Empire for, insurrection, and he has been beaten and sentenced to death. And he is then mocked. And such an interesting thing. He is
Yeah.
made fun of. He's teased,
After
humiliated.
he's been severely beaten, right, and tortured, really, he is then subjected to a kind of a ritual mockery by Pilate's soldiers.
Very interesting piece I read. One some of our members posted also said that it was customary as well for the Roman soldiers to rape a torture victim like this, and so there's every likelihood he'd also been sexually humiliated and sexually abused,
Mm.
um, which doesn't get talked about because we're never allowed to talk about sex in the church, and we're never allowed. That means we don't get to talk about abuse,
Mm.
and we don't get to talk about the victims of
Mm.
abuse.
Mm.
But so there he is. And how is he mocked? He is mocked by being given this purple red robe,
Mm.
a reed scepter,
Right.
interesting detail. And then the soldiers weave a crown for him
Out of thorns.
and they put it on his head, and that's very painful. But the big thing is not so much the physical pain at this moment,
Mm.
but it is the emotional pain. They put him up and they make fun of him.
Yeah, they bow to him and they call him Hail King of the Jews. They go down on one knee. Right.
So that's just the gospel moment of the story.
Mm.
Hidden right in plain sight in each one of these details
Right.
is the most powerful mystery of all.
Yeah.
And it has to know how the Roman soldiers are mocking him.
Right.
Um, One of the things I was thinking of, Clark and I were talking about this last week when we were thinking about this mystery, is how do we mock people? How are people mocked? We both were victims of bullying and teasing. Certainly, nerdy kids that we were not unfamiliar with teasing in grade school. Um, and the thing is, people mock the things about you
Yeah.
that are your strengths, that
That's
are your
right.
power. They never mock the things that are your weaknesses because you're already weak in that area. What they
Yeah.
mock about you are your joy and your power.
My mother showed me years ago. We took out a picture from my second grade year, and she showed me a picture standing next to all these little boys. And right next to him is this kid named Joe Leopard, who just mocked me and bullied me mercilessly. And I looked at it, I'm a head taller than Joe. And I said to my mother, "How did this happen?" And she said, "I taught you to be gentle." And
Right.
I was mocked for that. I was mocked for
And
that
and I was
gentleness.
mocked for being smart.
Yeah.
And I was being and if, yeah, I was smart. I was nerdy and smart. Yeah, for a lot of books I got mocked for it. I wasn't mocked because I was bad in gym class, and I most definitely was terrible in gym class. But why mock me? I mean, I've mocked myself. No one needs to destroy me there. The place to
Yeah.
destroy me was the place where I felt like I
I
had
was very
power.
dreamy and spent hours just staring out the window while the other kids were trying to learn in class. Nobody ever mocked me for that.
You get mocked.
Yeah.
Mockery is something we do to people to destroy their power. And that's what the Roman soldiers are trying to do to
Yeah.
Jesus. They're trying to destroy his power, but where does his power come from?
And why and how specifically is he mocked and why is he mocked in the way he is? It turns out that each of these details is a nod to the goddess and to the source of Jesus' power, the source of his wisdom, and probably even alludes to his training.
And his source of his joy.
Yeah. The scarlet to purple, it's a purple robe with inner sort of verging on scarlet. And this itself alludes to two things. One is a way in which the goddess was often portrayed wearing a purple, blue, or scarlet gown. And another is that the Virgin Mary in the oldest legends about her is weaving the purple and the scarlet for the veil at the temple when at the time of the Annunciation. So it's a direct nod to that.
That cloak that he's being given is a sign that he's wearing. He's being mocked for being a devotee of
Devotee.
the goddess,
Yeah,
a womanly devotee of the
right,
goddess, for his femininity,
right.
for his love of the feminine.
And reeds too. He's given a reed for a scepter, but which was a strange thing. If they'd really wanted to mock him, they would have found
A
Pilate.
stick
They would have
or
taken
a bone,
Or
or
Pilate's scepter and forced him to hold it or something like that.
they give
And
him a reed.
they give him a reed, and the reed is goes all the way back to Ningal, Inanna's mother, the goddess of the reeds, and to Inanna herself, whose name is meant to simulate two bowed reeds.
The M is
Yeah,
two bad reeds.
yeah,
And I will just refer to the apparition that when Clark first saw Our Lady of Woodstock, before he saw her, he saw two reeds
yeah.
waving in the wind,
Her emblem.
the
Yeah,
emblem of the mother.
yeah,
And so he is given a reed scepter.
yeah.
He is the goddess's consort, and he's being mocked for being her consort.
And then in every version, and this detail is mentioned in all four Gospels, the Synoptic Gospels and the Gospel of John as well. The soldiers plait, meaning they weave. Normally, you wouldn't plait a crown of thorns; you would plait a crown of roses, right? And he is mocked with a crowning, a cruel crowning,
Mm.
by crowning him as the goddess had traditionally been crowned for thousands of years in that region of the world. And so they're plaiting this crown of thorns. They're weaving it like they would a corona.
And he's the crown of thorns. They talk about the laurel wreath that were given to the victors in battle, or the victors in the Olympics, but it was the crown of flowers that distinguished the consort of the goddess.
Yeah,
the
yeah,
crown of the crown of roses, and
right,
instead of a crown of roses they give him a crown of
right,
thorns. So he
right,
is being mocked, not as a rabbi,
right.
not as a leader, or a political leader. He's being
She's
mocked.
not even really being mocked as a revolutionary.
No, he's being
Yeah,
mocked for being imagining he was a devotee of the goddess. And it's right there in the Gospels, in the details.
yeah,
And yet we never talk about it that
yeah.
way. And we never think about the fact is that's who he is. And that's what they want to destroy in him, is his love for her.
Mm,
And the horror is really that Christianity does destroy that love. It writes it out of the story.
mm,
He there's only the Father in the story we tell about Jesus. There is never his devotion to the mother
right.
and to the consort, his bride,
Mm.
to the Magdalene.
Now, here's a detail
Oh,
that I
yes, it is.
noticed just this week for the first time. I guess I'd always known it, but I'd never really paid much attention to it. And that is that if you look on the back of the miraculous medal, a lot of
Mm.
us know about the miraculous medal. We write about it in the book, and a number of people have posted, their own miraculous medals on Way of the Rose. But the story goes that in 1830, the nun Catherine Labouré witnessed an apparition of the Virgin Mary. It's the first great apparition of the modern age. And this is the one we write about, where on the back you see that M with the crossbar through it that turns out to be the cuneiform word for Inanna, the goddess Inanna, right? It's those two reeds bent together with a crossbar between them. But below those are two hearts. There is the Sacred Heart of Jesus, and there's the Immaculate Heart of Mary. So the Sacred Heart of Jesus has a wound, okay, from which there's blood flowing. It's also girded by a ring of thorns. If you look at Mary's heart, it's also wounded. The sword is still in place, but instead of a crown of thorns, it has a is girded with a ring of flowers. Right. So you have these two hearts. So we've talked a lot on Way of the Rose about this medal and the symbolism of it, but I saw for the first time this week that you've got the cross at the top and you have the M with the crossbar underneath it. So you've got Christianity, you've got the devotion to the great mother goddess below that, right? Historically, and then below that you've got these two hearts, and these are the this is the Heroes Gamos. This is
It's not mother and son, it's mother, it's lover, it's
the
Lord and
yeah,
Lady.
Lord and Lady, and it's right there below everything, going all the way back. Column of Saints, our ancestral past, going all the way down to the bottom
And
of
he's being
time.
mocked as being her lover, her Lord,
That's
her
it.
King.
Yeah, he's being mocked as a lover. And he's it's love that he's being mocked for, and this is what they try to destroy, right?
And it is so true of empire. I mean, right now we're witnessing and thinking about in our own
Yeah,
country, it's the horrors of empire, but it's not enough just to destroy the body, it has to also destroy the spirit,
yeah,
and the need to destroy people's spirit, to take away their power, their sense of worth, their sense of
yeah.
joy, and
And it's interesting, a lot of we've talked about this before, and but a lot of the worst things that happen in the sorrowful mysteries is the men are separated from the women. And if you look at the joyful mysteries and the glorious mysteries,
the men and women are all together,
what they all have in common is the presence of men and women, right? They're all together, and the women are there in
very
and they're
empowered,
very
present.
powerful. They're very present. They wield tremendous influence. They're performing the active roles, right? And the third, we'll talk about this later, but in the third glorious mystery, the descent of the Holy Spirit, Mary is basically leading a 9-day prayer intensive in an upper room of a house in Jerusalem. So,
But let's talk about the third mysteries, because one another way of looking at the mysteries and kind of opening them up and stepping inside their wonders is to lay the mysteries, the rosaries, on top of each other, one circle on top of another. And so in the third joyous mystery, you have the baby is born. And when a baby is born, we say it's crowning. It's crowned by its mother's vulva. That's the
right,
crowning.
right.
And it's literally
It's the crown of
the
flesh
crown of
of
flesh, the
the
crown of the
crown of
mother.
incarnation of the mother's womb.
And that's the first crown.
Yeah,
And the second crown is this crown of thorns.
yeah,
And I want to come back to it in a minute and think about human crowns a little bit, about what these are.
right.
Why do we put crowns on our leaders? Why do we put gold crowns and flower crowns? What's that all about? Because in the glorious mysteries, they're also crowned. But this time it's their crown chakras are lit up with fire.
Right, right.
They and that's that the when the crown chakra above their heads, when you really feel that soul
It's the
being.
rising of and it's the rising of the Kundalini that activates that, which is the feminine serpent energy, right? It rises up through the central channels of the body to the top, and activates that crown chakra, and that's what's happening in the ascent of the Holy Spirit. It's the reason why you always see flames of fire above their head.
And the flower crowns that are given to the lady and the lover are an acknowledgement of that.
Yeah,
Those are the beautiful crowns. And the horrible thing is the crowns of empire are a debasement of that.
right,
The true horror is the crown that Pontius Pilate wears. The true horror is the crown that the emperor wears, and the crowns that the popes will wear.
right.
Everybody wants the big hats.
And Jesus, it's interesting because Jesus never seeks any kind of worldly authority or
None.
power. So he's actually mocked in the crowning with thorns. He's actually mocked for a thing that he never seeks. Right? They're afraid of him seeking power or wielding power or influence.
His power just comes from his love for the
His
lady.
his power is from the bottom up. It doesn't wield top down
He's not looking for
authoritarian
a
power.
crown.
No, he's not
He
a
has a crown.
yeah.
He has that activated crown
Yeah.
chakra.
Now, speaking of which, when we get to not to do too many spoilers here, but when we get to the third mystery of the glorious mysteries, we'll talk a little bit about Mary Magdalene because traditionally it says she was cured of 7 devils, but that's kind of code for she had activated within her these 7 energies. right?
Right.
And that's what happens when the Lord and Lady come together. They both get activated.
They both become activated, and they're, and the thing is, he's being, they would have understood Mary Magdalene and Jesus as a couple,
Yeah.
and they would have understood her as the goddess and the consort, and there he
all of
is.
all of in the mythic structure of New Testament Christianity, everything is there. Like the whole story just overlaps perfectly with the mystery religions of the
Yeah.
Mediterranean world. But they've gone through it, surgically removed all references to the goddess. They've left
Yeah,
the
but
consort in
then they leave,
place.
but they leave the reed, but they leave the reed scepter. They
There are all
leave the
these
purple
tells.
red robe.
Yeah,
They leave the crown of thorns,
there are
and
all these tells.
they're all the tells, and and they're right there, and there it is in the center of the rosary, and it's also really about how we mock the feminine,
Yeah.
and how when we become lovers of the feminine and lovers of the divine feminine, we become mockable. Clark and I wouldn't know anything about this.
Mm-hmm. No, we wouldn't. We wouldn't know anything about
But there is a
that.
way it makes us a little foolish.
Yeah.
And somebody said that Connor said that it looks like Clark's having iced tea with mint, and he most
You
definitely
better
is.
believe I'm having that, Connor, and it makes sense that you be the one to recognize
um,
that.
and 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 we get to this central mystery, and we we've watched Mary be recognized for who she is and claim her joy, and then we watch empire try to destroy that joy and to destroy that life force.
And yet I think there's something worth recognizing. You talked a lot about how the sorrow it contains the seeds of joy, and
Yes.
the joy contains the seeds of sorrow, right? And even in this, even in these terrible, sorrowful mysteries, we see a slow but steady reassertion of the feminine presence, right? Until by the time we get to the crucifixion, we have the mother in her most powerful form that she appears in, her most powerful incarnation, which is Our Lady of Sorrows. And so we see Jesus alone with no female companions and no male companions even in the garden, right? In the agony in the garden. And then he's beaten by the soldiers. Presumably that takes place in the courtyard with the soldiers in a male militaristic sort of setting. Again, he's mocked. But once he's on the road to Calvary, the women are there and they follow along, right? And they witness. And at the cross, it's mostly women. The disciples, except for John, the disciples have all fled in terror. They've all betrayed him.
If we think of the joyful, sorrowful, and glorious mysteries as the mysteries of deep time.
Yeah,
So, on the one hand, we're looking at the singularity of the Christian story, but we're also looking at the enormity of the story of life on earth.
yeah,
And we take Jesus as a kind of avatar for all life on earth. The
right.
child of the mother is the life of this planet.
Yeah.
I sometimes think of this as this moment. The agony in the garden is our species. The sorrows are the sorrows of our species. And, we're in a mess as a
Well,
species.
the joys,
Let me
the
just,
joys of our species too. It's our modern
it's
species.
our modern species.
Yeah.
And it's when we step into agriculture and trying to control the earth. So we're in the garden in the beginning. First mystery, we're still in the garden. We still haven't mucked with the garden. But some people can see something bad's coming. Then we start scourging the planet. We start hoeing the fields. We start scourging the animals, domesticating them.
Yeah.
We start living by agriculture and empire. And we invent war, misogyny, slavery. I mean, one of the things I think that's important to look at is to think at this moment is, can empire be reformed? People have been trying since it was instituted.
Every
Hasn't
every
worked.
every crown is authoritarianism doesn't work. Large scale governmental industries ultimately don't work. Human beings weren't really made for them. Every crown is a crown of thorns.
And we get to the third mystery, and it's really that crown of thorns is a symbol of the way we're stuck in our heads
Hmm.
as a species. I
Yeah.
sometimes say the rosary is trying to get us out of our heads.
Hmm.
We've privileged mind, we've privileged our thinking. There's a saying in AA, our best thinking got us here, which is in a room for Alcoholics Anonymous. And our best thinking as a species has brought our planet to the brink of extinction. And that's that crown of thorns. Our best thinking, our consciousness as human beings has not served us. and it's a very painful, very sorrowful image that this is the moment, that we get to as a species where we don't know how to get out of our heads anymore.
Right. And from there, which we'll talk about next week, we're really on this, once the road to Calvary begins, they talk about the stations of the cross. It is really a relentless and inevitable progress that leads to the crucifixion. Where I think we're at the stage in this 12,000 year period of quote modern history of Homo sapiens when we're in kind of what Derek Jensen calls the end game, where we are deciding whether or not we're going to continue as a
And that
species.
central moment where we get struck is the moment where we begin to mock those who are devoted to the goddess, and that's what empire does until the goddess gets written out of the story.
Hmm.
Ashura, Yahweh's wife, written out of the story. The
Yeah.
goddess and her relationship to Yeshua, written out of the story. Mary Magdalene, written out of the story.
Yeah.
Patrice Wegman says, "Time to replace the crown of thorns with a crown of roses." That's it.
Yeah, that's the
That's it.
resurrection.
That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing, because what we're
Yeah.
literally doing when we pray the rosary is we are with our prayers weaving a different crown. We are plating our prayers into a crown of flowers for
Mm.
the lady.
My sister called last night, and she's a long-term meditator and devotee of prayer practices and mantras and things like that. And she was reminding me of a modern discovery that the biology of mantra practice uh, sort of retones the nervous system and the vagus nerve in particular, and puts people in a very deep frame of mind where they become incredibly resistant to stress and to manipulation. So that in praying the rosary, we really, we get ourselves centered within and underneath that crown of roses, and we become much more resistant uh, to, to to danger. Like we are able to remain calm and at peace and centered, and to attend to Our Lady's directions uh, in that space, which is a good place to be these days.
Yeah. And I think that the great I mean, I don't ever want to let myself off the hook when I read these mysteries, because I think it's always too easy to say, imagine I'm one of the good guys. And I have to always imagine I'm one of the soldiers too.
Mm,
And I have to say, in what way do I participate in mockery,
mm,
which seems to be the ultimate sin in the rosary, even more than physical violence. The way that we dismiss people's joy, we make fun of their joy, or we destroy their dreams or their love or their beauty.
mm. Uh,
Wow, wonderful question.
Laurel Ann writes, I wonder where is the rage in the rosary? Where is the destructive power, i.e., Kali, of the goddess whose child has been murdered by the empire? That's a really, really good
I
question.
love it.
Yeah, it's a good question.
And I think that the mother, I think it's in those 3 days in between the sorrowful and the
Yeah,
resurrection, and what
yeah,
those 3 days are.
yeah,
I mean, this mother takes us back, will take her back into her womb, and
yeah.
and she will, that body will be lowered
Well,
into her
yeah,
arms at the
but let's
end.
talk a little bit about that Kali energy, because that, the Kali energy is manifested in the Western tradition primarily in terms of the Black Madonnas. We see that energy manifested through their great power to perform miracles and also their discernment. Like if you read a lot of the miracle stories about the various Black Madonnas, like Our Lady of Rocamadour, she is frequently schooling power, right? Like a lot of the miracles have this in common. She is uh, constantly overturning the decrees of the powerful, of autocrats, of dictators, of
Police
the police, the kings, and setting the scales to right. This seems to be
freeing
what she does.
prisoners.
Freeing prisoners. She subverts the unfeeling sort of automatic rule of law and so forth and so on. But that image goes all the way back to the beginning. We write in Way of the Rose about a figure from the earliest Mesopotamian myths, right? there is the sea goddess
Tiamat?
Tiamat. Yeah, Tiamat. And Marduk, her grandson, who's a sky god, he wants to overthrow her, take back her power. She's the great mother goddess, oftentimes, described as the sea goddess. And so he summons up a great wind and he fires an arrow, and using the power of the force of the wind, he drives the arrow through down her throat to pierce her heart. So that the pierced heart of Mary, right, in the image of Our Lady of Sorrows, which is not you know, a part of the rosary, but is woven into it. It would have been assumed by medieval people.
In the presentation, a sword shall pierce
That's
your
right.
heart.
That's right.
Is that is that sword of
Yeah.
Marduk that goes into
Yeah.
Tiamat's
Yeah.
heart? And I think though that we are being taught that empire is the problem. And
Yeah.
here becomes a really interesting question. Can empire be reformed? I mean, the great question is Jesus goes to the city and he overturns the moneylenders' tables
Yeah.
and he tries to take on the authorities of the day
Right.
and he's destroyed in the city. And I think one of the great questions is can the city reform itself or does the city itself have to be taken down?
Yeah, and Jesus, the message of the Sermon on the Mount and most of Jesus's teaching seems to be that of a spiritual revolution that dismantles power structures rather than affirming them. Now, Christianity historically has done nothing since Jesus's death but build one empire after another. There's been very, very little Christianity that wasn't devoted to empire building. You find little pockets of it here or there where there are small communities of people who try to live very simply. Catholics are trying to do that. But for the most part, it's been one empire after another. But they all eventually come
And
down.
empire, and what defines empires, if we're going to go back to the heart of this mystery, are those crowns.
Yeah,
The wrong kind of crown, not the crowns of flowers, but the crowns of
yeah.
power. And the crowns that say, I'm in charge and I have authority. Um,
Now, Sarah Ferguson said something mockery. I think of the photos on social media of white people. Let's go ahead and say white supremacists. Sarah didn't say that, but it seemed pretty clear from the photos. Were mocking George Floyd's death by kneeling on each other's necks by reenacting it. This happened at a protest, and that's exactly right. That's exactly what
the
what
tool is
what's what's happening in this.
mocking the sorrow of people,
Yeah,
mocking the pain of people.
yeah.
Mockery is such a is a horrific
Act of
act
violence.
of violence. And in fact, in the Rosary says it's an even worse act of violence than the physical violence
And if you think
that's
about
meted
it,
out to.
and if you think about it, they Jesus is, he endures this phenomenal inner anguish that's really an internal experience on the night of the in the agony of the garden, and then he's scourged and beaten really terribly bad. After that, they sort of work their way up to the ultimate, you know, non-fatal version of that, which is this act of mockery, is to try to destroy him psychologically and emotionally.
Yeah.
But he isn't
Patricia
destroyed.
echoes Gandhi's famous statement about Christianity. She said, Christianity hasn't been tried and failed. It hasn't been tried. And
Right.
Gandhi famously said that. But here's the thing.
What Gandhi actually said was he was asked about Christianity, and he said it would be a good idea.
I mean, but the thing is, the problem is when you start living in lines of authority and you start trying to create a system and an organization and you start trying to own property and you have priests and you have inner circles and you have outer circles. I don't care if you're the Buddha or you're Jesus, everything goes for crap because because it becomes a little club and some people are in and some people are
And
out
there's money and
and there's money and there's sexual scandals and everybody's deciding who's right and who's
property and
wrong
power.
and
They
and
all they almost all
they've
have
all
celibate.
failed.
They
They've
almost all
all failed.
have celibate orders, by the way, because if you have celibate orders, you can keep all the money in the institution. Whereas if you have legitimate heirs or issues, then the property gets siphoned off, right?
Well,
So
and on this note, because we're coming at the end, Patrice brings up Humpty Dumpty, and it's a children's rhyme that's really about the Tower card and the tarot. And I posted recently that card. If the Tower of there are two towers. One tower is the Tower of Empire, which can only fall. It's the Tower of Babel.
yeah,
And the other tower never falls. And that is the tower that is the Magdalene. And Magdalene means the tower.
Right.
And she is the watchtower. And what she holds within her is the column of
Yeah,
saints.
she manifests it.
She manifests. She is the physical
Yeah.
manifestation of the
Yeah.
column of saints.
Yeah.
And she is the earth. And the earth is the column of saints. And it is within us and without us,
Yeah.
beneath us. It bears us up and it will never fall.
And the flames that activate those seven chakras are really just the flame that dances atop the candle of the column of saints, which goes all the way down. Think of it that way, as the dead are that
And
wax and
Jesus
that wick
recognized her as
goes
that.
all the way down.
He recognized her as the goddess, and he is mocked for recognizing
Yeah.
her and knowing her.
Yeah.
And so we will withstand the mockery that will come to us as we pray our rosaries. You know, in the beginning, I was so shy about praying my rosary in public. I do it on my fingers so people would know what I was doing. I just pull it out and I just pray the rosary.
Not me. I just say, what the hell?
Sometimes I think we were mocked as kids, so yeah, we don't care. Anyway, thank you all so much. We will meet next week where we will talk about carrying the cross, which is such a complicated mystery.
Yeah.
We will be finishing up Our Lady's Novena this week as well. It seems to me not coincidental that this mystery was the mystery inside of Our Lady's Novena
Yeah.
and
Fifth
Crown
day.
of Thorns,
Yeah.
the fifth day,
Yeah.
and that she wanted us to think about the Crown of Thorns inside of her novena about deep time.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye. There's a
Bye
phone meeting at
bye.
8 if you want to join. We're doing a whole rosary.
Well, you're saying that people will be watching this
Oh,
for days.
okay.
So
Well, tonight on
tonight, this particular night.
Thursday night, 8 o'clock, we have a rosary meeting on the phone.
All righty. Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.